All right, tips and tricks for playing in a Fancy Grounds game, Fancy Grounds Tabletop for 5th edition specifically. Just some things you could use to make your overall experience much quicker, better, because it's not the most intuitive and or user-friendly experience. But if you know what you're doing, it can be pretty powerful and pretty cool to play. For me, as a game master, it is so much easier for me to run games. So that's why it's my virtual tabletop of choice. So if you're looking to choose for a tabletop, you can consider this, and maybe this will help you kind of decide. But yeah, if you're my players, this will probably help you make the best use of Fancy Grounds while you're playing. There are going to be general tips that most Fancy Grounds players are going to be able to use, but in my game, as you can see, it's not the standard kind of setup. I use a different theme called Somewhat's Magnificent Mansion, which is a dark theme. And it's a little bit flatter, a little bit easier on the eyes, and loads a bit quicker. And there's a bunch of other free and paid for plugins that I use to up the experience. I'll try and mention those as I go. All right, so when you load into Fancy Grounds as a player, you're probably met with this screen, especially if you're in my game. And you could probably get rid of this campaign setup thing and choose. Okay, let's get rid of that. Choose your character if they are available. And it pops up with your character sheet, which we're going to leave for now. The first thing that we did, I realized earlier that my initial Fancy Grounds setup was already scaled differently, so I put it back to the default scaling of 100. So when you want to scale your Fancy Grounds kind of fonts and the size of windows and things, you can use the command /scale UI space, and I'm going to make it 90, but it's going to depend on what your monitor setup looks like. I think this is fine for me. And then we're going to, well, first, even before you do that, potentially what you want to do is if you have multiple monitors, I would advise that you stretch Fancy Grounds across because you can't really have two windows of this open unlike a browser type of story, like Roll20 or Foundry. So if you do have the ability to have multiple monitors, stretching it across is going to help. And of course, like moving your taskbar to kind of accommodate that is going to help as well. And after that, you'd want to scale your UI. The next sort of thing you want to do is, what I like to do is move some stuff around. So I'm going to unlock this thing, which is an indication of like the players. If there's more players, there'll be more of these. This chat/dice rolling bar. This thing, I like to keep it here. And this coin thing is not a standard thing in Fancy Grounds. It's something you get with a coin flip plugin. That you're also going to move because I don't like the way it is set up right now. So it's going to be movable if you click just on the outside of it. So we're going to move this further up here. Move this guy over here. And why I like to put it here instead of here is because unlike these dice things, the dice things always stay on top. So even when there's another window, does it even work for this? If there's another window, it will always move on top, but it doesn't do the same thing for the coin. So it's better to move the coin first. And your dice, there should be in your toolbar on the right-hand side, there should be 8 dice button there that brings up kind of the different colored dice as well as the dice settings. So we're going to go with, I think this elemental basics water is a nice color, and then we're going to toggle panel lock so that it enables us to move these guys. We're going to move them right there. And we're going to lock them. That looks pretty solid. This as a player, I don't think you need to be super wide, so I'm just going to make it as wide as to line up with this thing. Usually you only have these up till +5, -5 here. With these modifiers, these other ones are an extension, I believe, by Rogue 2E. You can also reduce or increase the die size, so it usually is at about 100. And then goes all the way down to 80. Yeah, and then you can move the top of this probably all the way to the upper edge here. And that's going to be your kind of side console that you start off with, and you can probably move this down here. And that's kind of like your blank screen. So the other thing you would notice if you're just playing with the standard version of Fantasy Grounds is that there's not usually this bar at the top here. So what we do with the bar is actually create tabs, like a tab in the browser. So let's go with kind of like a start screen type of tab. I'm going to rename this to start. And the main things that you want to start is your combat tracker, which is going to tell. So it's one of your tools that you have. You have combat tracker, your party sheets, calendar, dice, options, effects, and things. Combat tracker is probably where most of the action goes down. And it tells you like things about your party, about the enemies or allies and NPCs and stuff like that during combat. And the other thing is probably your character sheet, at least the first page. So you can always bring that up by double-clicking on your character portrait in this thing. And bringing that out a bit. So I'd say this is kind of like a good start point. Right, so the one thing you want to be kind of focused on when you kind of open up Fantasy Grounds. And then when you want to bring it back to an empty page, you unclick whatever button you created. So whenever you bring it back to the start button, these two things will come up in this configuration. It usually saves. So when you open up Fantasy Grounds, it will come back, but sometimes things get shifted around, and obviously when you scale, things get thrown around. So most of the time, it is pretty cool. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is maps. And so I probably advise my players to have a tab that is associated with like the campaign or the region map. So I'm just going to name this as region. And your DMs will usually share images, including maps and things. So I'm going to share from my DM side. And it will pop up on the player side. And as you can see, it is, it will kind of send you whatever the DM is looking at, and it isn't always in this configuration. The standard way to like scan is usually these arrow keys at the bottom here that'll pan around. And if you want to zoom in, there are these keys. But it's probably a silly way to do it. So the easiest way is to scroll or to also pan by clicking on the mouse scroll button and then dragging it around. Also, when it comes to moving the kind of maps and images and most windows around, you can kind of use the top left corner to anchor it in a place, and then use the control key to kind of freely resize. So Control plus the left mouse click is going to be able to quickly resize these things in a configuration that you prefer. So this is my campaign world, or the region that my players are running in. So you could either have just the map, or you could have map plus a set of notes or whatever that works for you. So you can access notes in the player tab here next to characters, and that will do that for you. Alright, so the next tab you probably want to create something to do with actual combat and battle maps. And for battle, you obviously want the combat tracker involved. You obviously want your character sheet, specifically the actions tab. You probably need a battle map that the Dungeon Master needs to share with you. So I'm going to do that from the Dungeon Master side. And kind of recalibrate it to get to a good size. This is not probably the best configuration. We're kind of playing around with things right now. After this, this is probably going to be the 3 windows that you're going to need. As a player, the combat tracker maybe would be better in a landscape configuration. So we can put this next to like the dice roller. We can kind of make the combat tracker wider and kind of smaller, and put the map in the upward corner here. And if you need more space, usually as a player, you're not going to use the sidebar as much. So you could use this button at the bottom to kind of make it smaller, and in that case you have more space to play around with. Yeah, this is probably an ideal configuration for combat if you're using one screen. And if you use the 2 screens, you can probably put the map on a whole other screen and have everything else on the other screen, which is how I usually run my games. You can also, with the map, kind of extend, like maximize it, which does that. So it kind of pulls the map to the space that wasn't taken up by the kind of chat bar and dice roller before. I don't like it because I can't really control it. Maybe somebody out there knows how to control it, so it seems like it's fixed. So it overlaps the chat bar here. You guys might like it, but the other problem is when you do this is that it kind of it gets pulled in to the other tabs as well. So if you want to move to the Start tab or the Region tab or the Battle tab, that gets pulled in. So I rather just resize, get it to a right size, and then and as you can see, like the region map is gone now, which is a problem. So the thing that you should do every time you get a map, and even from aspects of your character sheet. So say if you want to bring up your character sheet, but you can't find the icon, you can drag and drop the icon onto this bar here, which is a bunch of shortcuts. And there are these 12 shortcuts that are represented by F1 to 12. So if I press F1, kind of activates the sheet now. And if I press F2, nothing happens because there's nothing there. So in order to find a sheet again, without asking the Dungeon Master to reshare, you're going to have to look for what images were shared to you and kind of look at what was there. I believe this is Desert Tower Ruins 2. So every time you get a sheet, it's a good idea to take the link that's at the top left corner and just drop it down here. So when you do lose access, you can just bring it back. And the same story with the region map. We'll put that at the end there. So for this configuration, we're going to need the region map. And it seems the notes then disappeared, which is great. All right, talking about using the hotkeys, there isn't only one set of hotkeys. That's an F1 to 12. This is the basic one. When you hold Control, you get an entirely different row. That's C1 to 12. When you hold Shift, an entirely different row. That's S1 to 12. And when you hold Alt, it's entirely different from A1 to 12. Might be others, I don't know, but that's 4 sets of hotkeys that you could assign at the bottom if you like. Also, in my game, usually, okay, so let's make another tab that's got more to do with your character. So you want a tab that's kind of your character sheet at a glance. And usually, on Fancy Grounds, you just have access to this one window that's your character sheet, and then on the side there are tabs that go through the various aspects. In my game, we have a plugin called Floating Tabs that allows you to pull out some of the side tabs into new windows. So this pulls out the entire action tab out into a separate window. And you can probably pull that there, and you probably want your skills. Make your actions wide enough so that it doesn't kind of pull things into 2 levels. So, like if you make it too short, Thunder Wave goes into the next level, which makes it a bit messy. So try and get it to a place where it's all viewable. So probably characters should go after start. So this is a view of everything of a character that's related to the roles, and you can make another one that has more to do with abilities and inventory and notes and stuff like that. But we'll get into that right now. And of course, if you want to pull the floating tabs into your hotkeys, you can do that simply as well. So you can have the skills and abilities. And that will kind of mess with that as it goes. And also the F1, F2, F3 keys will also deal with those things. All right, so good idea to hotkey stuff. It is also possible when it comes to maps and or story based things is to minimize them. So you can right click on the map, click on this minimize. So you get every time you right click on something, there's usually a radial dial that will come up. And you can use that to minimize the map and put it wherever you want to put it. And then restore it back. This does the same thing. Does similar things with NPCs and things like that. But getting back to the battle, let's look at some tips and tricks for actual combat and how that works. On the topic of getting kind of the map back, if you do lose it, there's 2 other ways that you can to get a map back, especially if your token is on the map. One of them is to click this Find on Map token, and it'll bring it back. The other is to double click on the token, and that will bring it back. Or even on the combat tracker, that will bring it back. So you can bring it back if you're on a map in multiple ways. This thing here is, I think, paid for plugin that just makes it easier to see. But in general, if you double click on your token, it should bring the mapping in standard Fancy Grounds. All right, so we're going to look at kind of targeting. So when you want to target something, you got to make sure that that sheet is open and you're on the right token, because there can be multiple tokens And if you're clicking on the wrong tokens, even this spell thing here is a separate token that this character owns. And if you click on that token and targets, then it targets with the spell instead of him. So you go to him, make sure it's on the page, target him, then it will target. Right now, Z is also targeting an NPC for some reason, and we can undo that by going to the combat tracker and then control clicking on their token in the combat tracker. It usually works with the tokens. Sometimes it doesn't work if you just try and click on the bar. So try getting in with the token. And once you have something targeted, you can then roll by double clicking on things from your actions tab. Or even single clicking will work. So you can apply damage if you want to do rolls. You can do it once they are targeted. You actually even don't need to have them targeted. If you want to be even quicker with it, you can just drag and drop it onto them. So you can drag and drop an attack roll, then drag and drop a damage roll onto their kind of token on the map. But it also works if you do it on the token, on the combat tracker token or bar. So it will also target and apply, tell you where their hits, tells you and apply damage on there. So there's multiple ways to target and or apply damage and or status effects. If you wanted to, let's say, cast Sanctuary on the bad guy, you can do that if you like. Then there are kind of even more ways to do things to target. So you can target under the kind of pointers that you can make. So if you have like an AoE effect, that would, in order to move it, you need to actually move it with the square space. It won't move otherwise if you click anywhere else. So if you remove something that you just created, there's a pointer to move the square. I think, no, yeah, the side doesn't even work. And if you want to make it bigger or smaller, you click on the size thing and it will go up and down. So if you do that, and then you click on the target mode. So at the top here, there's another bar of different actions that you have. Some of them are related to drawing, erasure. You can also select multiple things in the square. So right now it's selected both the enemy and the alarm spell, which should be bigger than that. But you can also target anything that's under this spell. At least it should. Oh, actually, no, because we're on the wrong thing once again. So you do that, yes, it should target. So if you moved this thing, then click on target, nothing happens. So if you move it back, then click on target, then it will target everything under that situation. You can also just click on target mode and then target something separately. So if you want to do it just straight from the map quickly, you can click on target mode. If your control button is not working, then you can use drag and drop the target into it in order to do that. So there's different types of pointers you can make. And you obviously need to find the white square in order to move it about, and you'll be able to resize with the size kind of cloud that's on the top. Then you should probably remove your pointers when you don't need them, remove tokens when you don't need them. There's also a quick way to bring up the pointers and the tokens. So if you want a line to see like a distance, you need to click both the left mouse button and the right mouse button together, and it will generate the line. The difference between this and doing it via the radial menu is that it doesn't stay. So every time you make a new one, the previous one will go away. But you are able to, like, once it is there, as long as you don't click on both buttons again, it should be fine. You can also quickly bring up a circle or a square or a cone in the same way by holding either Shift, Alt, or Control while you're clicking with both mouse buttons. So Control is going to get you circle, Shift is going to get you square, and Alt is going to get you the cone, which is pretty handy. In my game, I have access to spell tokens and a spell token kind of drag-drop ability. So let's get rid of these pointers. So let's say if Orbanzi wanted to cast Thunderwave, he can drag and drop Thunderwave into the sheet. Once he drags and dropped it, the thing that was an icon before here then turns into a target, and when you click that, everything that's under this area will get targeted. So click it, it automatically targets everything under that area, and then you can launch the spell and apply the damage. Then you can untarget if you like. So different things have different effects. The darkness spell, for instance, is going to actually create darkness, so it's easier to get in there. It is possible if token lighting is affected on the map, then you should be able to see it. So if I, as a DM, activate token lighting, and if Orbanzi gets in there, he can't see anything because it's dark. So let's undo that for now. The other problem that can arise with putting tokens, multiple tokens on the field is stacking. So let's throw an alarm spell here. Because sometimes characters can kind of get stuck under tokens, and you want to move them around, and then you kind of get stuck. The best way to resolve this is just to ask the dungeon master to resolve the stack, and when that happens, the spell token kind of gets sent to the bottom. And then you want to try and find your character, because there'll always be a space on the character token that will select the character, not the spell token. So here, it's pretty much where this health bar is. So every time you want to try and get a hold of Z, it's probably going to be in this area, and then we'll be able to like pull him out nicely. Otherwise, the health bar will also get to him in a nice way. All right. The other thing that is new, so for my character Lenny, that can use the spell. So for one of my player characters, Nanny, she can use the spell So for one of my player characters, Nanny, she can use the spell Spirit Guardians. And when she does, can apply an aura effect. So that is the word aura in capital letters, colon, space, and how big it is. So you see the effect kind of being applied to Nanny's sheet over here. And if another player can turn it off. No. So now when Nanny moves around, the spirit guardians kind of move with them, which is more ideal than using the spell tokens, even though the spell token looks pretty cool. It is a bit finicky in this regard. The aura effects thing is unfortunately a paid for, at least getting this kind of effect here is a paid for thing. There is a free plugin that kind of tracks the aura for certain things, but it doesn't show it to you. It just kind of tells you what's within the aura, or kind of determining kind of wide how high things are. Speaking of how high things are, you can also for a token, while you speaking of how high things are, you can also for a token kind of change the height. Okay. Alt changes the size if you make something bigger. Control changes the size if you want to make it. So if you make something bigger, control and scroll on the mouse will change the size. If you're going to change the height of something, alt and scroll is going to change. It's going to give you a notification of how high something is here in your feet. Shift scroll is just going to change the direction that a character is facing, which isn't really a thing for my game, but in yours it might be interesting. And I think those are all the tips and tricks that I have. I hope this is helpful for people. If you have any questions about any further clarifications, you can drop them in the comments and I'll try and get back to you. I'll probably try and post, if you want me to post the links to the different plugins that I'm using, I can go ahead to do that, so let me know. But otherwise, good luck with your adventuring.